Welcome to the webinar Immersion Education Model in Bilingual Communities. My name is Vicente Noyar and I'm the Policy Manager at the Network to Promote Linguistic Diversity. Immersion education is a pedagogical model in which students receive their subject matter instruction through the medium of a target language. In bilingual communities where a hegemonic state language coexists with a lesser used, indigenous, minority, or regional language, the target language might belong to the second group, with the aim of guaranteeing that their speakers will continue to learn and use their language and transmit it to the next generation. Too often, pedagogical models for teaching and learning languages are exposed to political debates whose interest has little to do with the promotion of language learning. In today's webinar, our panelists will offer to the audience a scientific approach to the language immersion model. They will also share with all of you the outcomes of the application of this model in three territories quite different from the sociolinguistic point of view. Unfortunately, it won't be possible to interact with our panelists live. However, you will find their email address under their names as the presentations are going on, in case you wish to send them any questions. We have an absolutely amazing lineup. The first person who is going to speak is Professor Jasone Cenoz from the University of the Basque Country. I'm not going to steal any more of your time. Welcome, Jasone. The floor is yours.
Egunon, Arratsaldeon. Good morning, good afternoon for others. I'm going to talk about immersion education and minority languages, and I would like to go back to the origin of immersion in Canada. And this was in an English-speaking school where English-speaking children went to school in Montreal, in St. Lambert, and three mothers were very interested in their children learning more French than they did when they only have French as a school subject. So they were trying to have some subjects through the medium of French. This was finally successful, fighting quite a bit, but it was finally successful. And we have the immersion programs in Canada. The characteristic of immersion programs in Canada is that the school children are to receive instruction of content subjects entirely or partly in the second language. There are different types. The starting point can be different. It can be early in kindergarten. It can be middle, like in the middle of primary education, or it can be late in secondary education. The intensity can also be different. If it is partial, it's 50% of the school time is in one language. In this case, it's in French for speakers of English as a home language. And total is when it is all the time in the second language in the first grades, but later in the Canadian model, it goes down to 50% later. And the languages, the regular one is to have one language, which is usually French. But there is also double immersion with immersion in French and Hebrew, for example. The programs in Canada were quite successful. And they spread to different places in Canada, also in the US, and other parts of the world. Now we have immersion in many parts of the world. And in 1997, Swain and Johnson were trying to define the characteristics of immersion, the way it was kind of the core characteristics of immersion. And according to them, the L2 is the medium of instruction. The curriculum is the same as for students who are studying in the first language. There is support for the first language. The program, the idea is that it is additive. This is very important in the North American context because it's not replacing the first language that you forget about it and you become just a speaker of the second language. The first language is also there. Then it is the idea that in most cases, the L2 is mainly in the classroom, student-centered with similar and limited levels of L2 proficiency, teachers are bilingual, and the classroom culture is that of the local community. So these are the typical characteristics of immersion in Canada, in some places in the States, in many other places as well, all over the world. Canadian immersion has been very successful. And this has been because of the results and because of the strong evaluation, the strong research that has been done in Canadian immersion. So the results, what was found was that the L1, English in this case, was the same, the students got the same level in all skills as the students in other programs. In the L2, much higher levels than in regular programs, but they were different from Francophone students, mainly in the productive skills. They didn't reach the same level as the students who were Francophone and were attending French medium education. Academic content was the same level, and the attitudes were positive. And there have been many books and many articles, lots of articles and books, very strong research on it. What happens in Europe? In Europe, we see that in many areas, immersion has been associated with minority languages. And here we have, for example, about Basque and also Brittany with the Lewan association, and for example, Welsh, but we will see also, of course, the other cases like Ireland, Finland, or Catalonia. The idea of immersion in Europe has been closely associated with what Fishman called reversing language shift. So immersion education has been to contribute to trying to stop the process of losing or weakening minority languages. So in Europe, it has been a combination. We have a combination of programs that are language maintenance and development for speakers of minority languages and immersion for speakers of majority languages or other home languages. So it's a combination of both. It would be, in a strict sense, immersion for those who speak the majority language at home or other languages that are not a minority. But this link with the minority languages, which, for example, in the case of the Basque country that I know better, is also related a lot to women. And here we have Elvira Zipitria, who was a school teacher teaching in very difficult times through the medium of Basque. And the origin comes more from minority languages and the idea of using the first language in education. In the Basque country in the 1980s, at the beginning of the 1980s, we had the development of 3 models, and 2 of them can be regarded as immersion, at least for some students. The model A is for Spanish speakers. Nowadays, it's not only Spanish speakers. Spanish is the majority language, not only for them, but also in some cases, in all the models, we have speakers of other home languages, of course. But Spanish is the medium of instruction, and Basque is taught only as a subject. In principle, this is not an immersion program. Model B is 50% Spanish, 50% Basque, and there can be some variations, and this we can call, this is a partial immersion program for students who have Spanish as a home language. And the D model is Basque as the medium of instruction. Spanish is only taught as a subject. This is an immersion program for students who have Spanish as a home language, and it is a language maintenance program for students who have Basque as a home language. We also have English in all the programs. Things are a bit more complex than what we see here, because we also have English as an additional language of instruction it can be in all the programs. And if we look at the right at the percentages, we can see that parents choose to take the children mainly to the strongest immersion program or language maintenance program. So that means that in the deep model, we usually have students with Basque as a first language, but also a very increasing number of students with Spanish as a first language, and the parents have chosen this model with a very intensive Basque medium instruction model, immersion model, for them to learn more Basque. Okay. We also have evaluation of the Basque model, and here we can see that just in the same the direction is the same as in Canada. The first language is Spanish, we get the same level. In the second language, Basque, much higher level than in regular programs, but not exactly the same. I mean, the productive skills are always a bit, is different from those students who speak Basque at home. And here we have the L3, because English is also important in our school programs. And usually students in immersion get higher level in most skills once other factors are controlled. And this, of course, is because of the positive influence of bilingualism. Content, the same level, and attitudes, in general, they are positive. And we also have quite a lot of publications, not only on Basque, but on minority languages in education. And the results are quite similar. But I wanted to say something about CLIL programs, because in recent years, I mean, we have a lot of CLIL programs about English mainly, and teaching English as a language of instruction. CLIL programs, if we look at this definition from 2010, it says it's a dual-focused education approach in which an additional language is used for the learning and teaching of both content and language. Here, what we see, we can look at this and say, why is this different from immersion? We can say that CLIL programs have come mainly from teachers of English and researchers who work with the English language. And they have considered many times that it's completely different and from other things that are being done. But this is due, in most cases, to the fact that they don't know what is being done in the context of minority languages. And this is what happens in these cases, because they think that it's completely new because they are teaching 1, 2, 3 subjects through the medium of English. What we have been analyzing the core characteristics of immersion and CLIL, and this we have done in collaboration with Fred Genesee from Canada, who wrote one of the most important books on Canadian immersion, and Dirk Gorter from ECRML in the Basque Country. And we have, after doing a deep analysis, we see that the language aims in CLIL programs and immersion programs, the language aim is multilingualism. In terms of educational and social aim is enrichment. The type of child is a majority L1 child when we're talking about immersion and when we're talking about CLIL. And the medium of instruction is either the minority in immersion, the minority language, and or English in CLIL. There are some differences, but the main difference is the intensity, that in the case of CLIL, sometimes it's only 1 or 2 school subjects through the medium of English, and not 50%, which is usually taken as the minimum for immersion. But in both cases, there can be situations. I mean, we can say, well, the language is used in the social context. It depends. In some cases, in some towns, in some cities, we see that, for example, in the case of the Basque Country, there is even more English than Basque used when we are talking about, I mean, that cannot be a difference between immersion and CLIL in the characteristics. So the main difference comes to be, it's English instead of a minority language, and all the prejudices that means. So we cannot have, on one hand, minority language this way, English the other way, and there is a fight between the two of them that sometimes has happened. I mean, what it is important to see is that languages don't have to be in this context of I learn Basque or I learn English. It doesn't have to be like that. They don't have to be enemies. They can be friends, and we can use the resources of the different languages in a very positive way, so that children who are bilingual benefit more from the bilingualism when they are learning a third language. And here I would like to share with you, this is just to give you the information about this video, which is in YouTube. Let's make the most of multilingualism, what we do in some Basque schools with children who are using resources from the 3 languages, but protecting and encouraging mainly the minority language, because this is the language that needs to be encouraged. And just to finish, I want to say that there are challenges for immersion education and CLIL, and these challenges are shared by immersion and CLIL. One is productive skills. We know that just by, well, we need quite active methodology for students to produce the language, the target language more. That could be the minority language, or in CLIL classes, it can be whatever you call CLIL, it can be other languages, English or others. The use beyond the school, and this cannot be done by the school alone. This is related to other institutions as well. The population with other home languages, I mean, population and school children with other home languages, I mean, the idea of respecting other home languages, the idea of considering them an asset and not an obstacle, even if they are not part of the curriculum, and a specific teacher education. It's not enough to say, now you're going to teach chemistry through the medium of Basque or Welsh or Irish, but there has to be a very important focus on language and on language awareness to be a teacher in immersion education or in CLIL. So this is all. Thank you for sharing this with me. Eskerrik asko. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for these clear presentations. I'm very sure that your speech will have dispelled many doubts and misunderstandings. Our next panelist is the chair of the Committee of Experts of the Charter, who will speak on the position of the Committee about the immersion education model through the regional or minority languages in bilingual communities. Welcome, Vesna. Thanks for having accepted our invitation. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So to start with, of course, I would like to thank the organizers to be sent to have me here, to invite me to this webinar to present the view from the European Charter for Regional Minority Languages. Although, as usual, I must emphasize that the opinions expressed are my own and not necessarily shared by the committee. As you know, this is the convention. This is one of the conventions of the Council of Europe. It has been in force since 1998, and it's dedicated to the protection and promotion of regional or minority languages in various fields of public life, with a particular emphasis on education. The importance of education is seen in the objectives and principles in Article 7, where at least 3 subparagraphs deal directly with the use of regional minority languages in education. And furthermore, in Part 3 of the Charter, states have to choose at least 3 subparagraphs from Article 8 on education for the languages they select in their ratification instrument as the language is protected by Part 3 of the Charter. This is part of what is called the menu system under the Charter that allows states to choose between the various undertakings. Article 8 provides for several options and models of including minority languages in education, to provide education in the relevant minority language, to provide a substantial part of education in the minority language, or to provide for the teaching of the minority language. Finally, there is also the last option that offers the choice between any of the previous models, at least to those pupils whose families so request and whose number is considered sufficient. So the last option will depend on the demand, while the 3 previous options do not depend on the demand by the parents. They have to be put in place depending on some other factors. The choice between the 3 levels of stringency will depend on several factors, but the most important being probably whether the language is spoken by a sufficient number of speakers on a compact territory, or whether the speakers are dispersed throughout the territory of the state party. The application of the charter is, of course, much stronger if the speakers are concentrated on a limited territory. The charter does not set numerical criteria other than a number has to be considered sufficient for a particular measure and according to the situation of each of the languages. Whichever the option is chosen, the charter requires that it should be without prejudice to the teaching of the official language of the state. Even though the charter's main objective is the protection and promotion of regional minority languages, it also promotes interculturalism and multilingualism as the final objectives. The explanatory report of the charter is quite clear on that. And now I'm quoting the phrase, "and without prejudice to the teaching of the official language of the state," is intended to avert any possibility of interpreting the provisions of Article 8, paragraph 1, and in particular the first option of each of subparagraphs, as excluding the teaching of the language spoken by the majority. Such a tendency to form linguistic ghettos would be contrary to the principles of interculturalism and multilingualism, end of quote. The immersion model would be covered by the first option of Article 8, education in the minority language. The Charter requires from the states that ratify this option to make available, this is the phrase used by the Charter, to make available education in the language. The Committee of Experts has been quite liberal in assessing the quantity criteria here. How much of the teaching has to be through the language, the minority language chosen under the Charter. It definitely doesn't have to be 100% because there should also be the teaching of the official language, but it preferable has to be more than 50% because otherwise it would fall under the second subparagraph. So to make available the substantial part of the teaching in the language. Sometimes the approach by states parties is that they provide science subject in the majority language and sometimes the social subjects in the minority language, but that should also not be a fixed model, but it should depend on the situation on the ground and on the needs of the speakers. What is requested under this and also other provisions, but especially under this, and I think Jasone mentioned the problem, is that there has to be a specific teacher training to teach subjects, particular subjects in the language, because after all, you want to have a quality language in the classroom. You don't need to have improvisations and bad language. So the teaching materials, of course, are also necessary. And that is something that is required by the Committee of Experts when we deal with minority language education. The teaching materials are many times a problem because the states do not cover all the needs expressed by the speakers. One of the conclusions also made by the Committee of Experts is that it does not, the teaching in the language doesn't have to be mandatory for all the pupils living on the particular territory. It may depend on the situation on the ground. For example, in Wales, there are different types of schools with English or with Welsh as the language of instruction, and with the teaching of the other language. But there are also bilingual schools in certain territories, and this is a kind of a more democratic approach to cater for the needs of all the speakers. But on the other hand, it may also exhaust the resources, and it may also, if I may say, dilute the situation of a minority language, and so make it a less of a less quality. I must emphasize that regardless of this need to keep the teaching of the official language in place, the Charter is actually not concerned with this protection of the official language, because that is the national question. And as some examples from Canada show, the majority cannot be treated as a minority, regardless of their particular situation. That was one of the conclusions made by the Human Rights Committee under the International Covenant for political rights. There is also this decision made by the European Court of Human Rights way back in 1968 in the famous Belgian linguistic case, where the court looked into the situation of the two official languages in Belgium, where those two languages were not represented or were not present in all communities. And then the court concluded that there is no duty to provide education in all co-official languages, but that there should be no discrimination. It is therefore, at least in my view, advisable to find a balance between the rights of various linguistic groups in order to respect them all and to have to cater for the needs of all the linguistic groups present in a certain territory, but keeping in mind all the time that the minority languages are in a more vulnerable situation, and that the protection of these languages is the primary objective of the Charter and under the work of the committee of experts. I think I was given quite a short time, so I hope that I have not extended it with my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Many thanks, Vesna, for your clarifying presentation. We move forward to the north. Hello, Edel. We are very curious to hear about the results of the language immersion model in Ireland.
Hello, everyone. I have been asked today to speak about immersion education in Ireland and our experiences here in Coexists, which is immersion in Ireland. So I will briefly go through just how the Irish medium education is working at present, the main results that have come through, and the main goals and if they are being reached. So beginning with how Irish medium education is working, and I would like to just give you a brief background of how we have come to 2021, the position we're in today. So as regards the background, and this has been referenced already at the start of the presentation, but for quite a large part of the 20th century, Irish was being taught in English medium schools mostly, and there was some unease with this, and during the 1960s especially, and due to international experience, and we've heard of the experiences in Canada, many parents and teachers thought that more Irish should be used within the schools and the pupils should have the opportunity to receive their education through the medium of Irish. So through very dedicated groups in communities throughout the 60s and 70s mostly, a lot of the Irish medium schools that we see today started to be formed. And now we have a situation where Irish medium education, or Gaeilge in Irish, is widespread, and that there are schools in every county in Ireland, north and south. We can see a rapid increase in the numbers of primary schools and post-primary schools from 1972 right up to 2018, the figures are covered here. And you can see that especially through the 80s and 90s, there were huge increases in the numbers of schools being formed. And these are for schools outside of the Gaeltacht areas. And the Gaeltacht areas in Ireland are areas where Irish is still used as the community language and is still the language of the people. So these are schools outside of that area where English was the main language in the community, and these schools have now been formed up to the point where we can see, and today we have throughout the whole of Ireland, including the Gaeltacht, the south and the north, there are around 300 preschools, 300 primary schools, and we have 74 post-primary schools, and these numbers are increasing all the time. So altogether there are 672 schools, and that's over the course of a 50-year history. I referenced the Gaeltacht areas there, and just to clarify that these are areas, as I've said, that Irish is still spoken on a daily basis. Although there has been some decline in some of these areas, and there was a worrying trend of a lot of the education being provided in these areas through the medium of English. Now, this was due to many factors, including possibly parental choice at times, and also a lack of resources being available in order to teach through the medium of Irish. This has changed over time, and due to the concerns about the Gaeltacht areas, a policy on Gaeltacht education was brought into place and is now running since 2017 until, well, at least next year. And the idea behind that is to contribute to support and promote the use of Irish as a living indigenous language in the Gaeltacht communities. And to date, this has been very successful, and we hope to build on the good work that has been done over the past few years. Resources have also been referenced in previous presentations, and this in the early days would have been a great concern. And I know myself, coming from teaching in a post-primary school, a lot of teachers had to create their own resources for education, which is not ideal. And over time, this has changed dramatically, and now there are a wealth of resources available for Irish medium education schools. So within Foras and Gaeilge, we have a publishing house called Ungoom, and they provide many resources for schools. And also Untitled is an organisation based in Belfast in the north of Ireland, providing resources primarily for schools in the north, but are used throughout the whole of the island. We also have done a lot of work over the past, especially 10 to 15 years, regarding terminology and lexicography to ensure that all the relevant terms that the pupils need and the language that they need is available as an app and as a dictionary, so that they are up to date with all their language skills. Over time, and at the start, the departments of education were not, funding Irish medium education at the very start, and many of these schools formed as with voluntary staff and providing their own resources. But over time, the departments of education in the north and south have provided resources for these. And COG in the south provides many resources, as well as SIA based in the north. So just to give you an insight as to where we have come from and where we are now, this is an idea of the types of resources that were available in the 60s and 70s when Irish medium education took off. And now we can see that we have come quite a long way. They are very high quality. We also have many online resources, and these help also within education, but also at home, so parents can help their pupils with their language learning. And these are just some examples of some online resources available. So moving on to the main results of Irish medium education over the past 50 years. And I'm referencing some research that was conducted and is on the website of Gaeilge. It's an organisation that helps Irish medium schools within the Gaeltacht and outside it. So we can see, and this has been the case in many other languages as well, that children develop fluency and literacy in both Irish and English in school. And they also have transferable skills that can be applied to other languages as well. Pupils, we have found, have better understanding of the foundation of language, grammar, word formation, and sentence structure. And we have also found that it's easier for children to learn additional language thanks to their literacy skills that they acquire through their immersion experience. Again, as has been the case in many other countries, we have found that children have cognitive advantages through their immersion education. and also that they have increased educational attainment. And this has been shown through standardised tests where pupils have attained higher grades in both English and in maths than their peers in English medium schools, which many people find surprising. We also have found that Irish medium primary schools are more likely to provide a broader curriculum than other school types. And also another positive feature of the immersion education in Ireland is that the children have confidence and a sense of identity. They receive a broader exposure to other cultures and they develop a greater respect for them. It also promotes a deeper multiculturalism and less racism. And we have also found that children have increased self-esteem that have come through the immersion education system. Many of that refers to international experiences and is common throughout, but for our own experiences in Ireland, we have seen over the past 50 years that many of the former pupils are now working in a range of areas, which is very helpful to the promotion of Irish just throughout society. So many of the former pupils of the schools have gone on to healthcare, retail, financial services, and a huge amount have gone on to education as well. Many of the former pupils raise their own children now, speaking through Irish and attending Irish medium schools, which is also a positive point. Former pupils have also gone on to promote Irish medium education, and as they've had such a positive experience. And one current example is that the recently appointed CEO of Comhairle na Gaelscoile, the Irish language body for education in the North, has actually come through the system himself and is now promoting it for the next generations to come. And in many areas, Irish-speaking communities have grown alongside the school, with the school as kind of the hub or the heart of the community. We have networks throughout the country that we have been establishing over many years, and over time they are now working and connecting with each other and learning from each other's experience. And this collaboration has helped to increase the levels of Irish medium education within the different communities, as we see a core part of every network is that they have preschool, primary and post-primary education services available within the community. Okay, moving on to are the main goals that were set by the immersion programs being reached. I'll start with the challenges that we have faced in Ireland as regards Irish medium education, because I would prefer to end on a more positive note. But some of the challenges that we have faced include the opportunities for using Irish outside of the school environment, and this has been referenced earlier as well. Unfortunately, some pupils associate speaking Irish with the school environment, and if they don't have opportunities to use Irish outside of the school, it can be limited to the school environment. But we have been working over many years to provide opportunities for pupils to use their Irish in other social activities and not attached to the school setting. One of the other challenges is establishing new schools, and this in part is due to possibly the bureaucracy attached to it, and also the numbers needed at present to form a new school, and that can pose challenges. There have been staffing difficulties in various areas over the time as well, particularly at preschool levels, where staff need to have a sufficient level of knowledge of preschool education as well as sufficient levels of Irish, and this is often difficult. And also at some specific subjects at post-primary level. And while some work has been done to provide training courses and to encourage more people into the sector, it's still a challenge at present. Support services for people, for example, with special needs over time have been lacking, although there has been an increase in these services in more recent years, for example, speech therapy or other services that pupils might need. And there is also a need for a policy for Irish medium education outside of the Gaeltacht, similar to the policy for Gaeltacht education that has been going for 4 years now. Okay, so moving on to the positive outcomes that we have witnessed regarding Irish medium education in Ireland. We have seen an increased educational attainment for pupils who have attended Irish medium education. There are an increased number of Irish speakers outside of the Gaeltacht areas, and this was one of the key features that we wanted to see at the start of this process. There are an increased number of Irish language communities, and this is very positive in that we we want communities to learn from each other and build share their knowledge with others, and we have witnessed this in recent years. There are now more positive attitudes towards Irish medium education and to Irish in general. In the past, Irish had at times had a negative connotation as regards the education system. We have seen that this has changed now through Irish medium education, and pupils seem to have a more positive attitude towards Irish when they finish their education. Language rights are being addressed, and given that Irish is our first official language, it's very important that pupils have the option and to attend Irish medium education and to get an education of a similar, if not better, standard as in English medium schools. And also over time, we're seeing that there are increased employment opportunities for Irish speakers, and this is a very positive feature for not just the education system, but for the wider community, that the past pupils that are coming through the system are now available and working in the community in different roles. So overall, we've had a very positive experience here, but still a long way to go to give opportunities to everybody to speak Irish. Okay, so thank you very much, Gormaigaf. Thanks for listening, and please feel free to contact me if you would like any more information on our experiences in Ireland.
Great, thank you very much, Edel. Without leaving the north, we move now to the east of the continent. Hello, Christina, welcome. You will tell us about the Swedish language immersion model in Finland. Am I wrong?
Thank you. Yes, I will do that. I'm happy to have the opportunity to give you a short brief of the situation in Finland when it comes to immersion education. But first of all, I'll put the frame for you with the language situation in Finland. As you know, we have two national languages in Finland, Finnish and Swedish. The population is 5.5 million, and Swedish is the mother tongue of about 300,000 people. According to the constitution, the Finnish and Swedish-speaking population is entitled to cultural and social services on an equal basis. The main rule is that you are entitled to use Swedish or Finnish in your contacts with bilingual municipal authorities and with state authorities. A municipality is regarded as bilingual if the minority is made up of at least 8% of the inhabitants or 3,000 people. Every child in Finland has the right to attend a daycare, preschool, and school in its own language, either Finnish or Swedish. All pupils are also taught the other national language. Most of the Swedish-speaking and bilingual families choose Swedish-speaking daycare and schools for their children, whereas most of the Finnish-speaking families put their children into Finnish-speaking daycare centers and schools. However, there is a large interest for Finnish-speaking families to give their children two languages from an early age through immersion. Immersion programs provide a good solution when faced with the need to provide students with a multilingual education to prepare them for a future Europe in which extraordinary linguistic complexity will prevail. Immersion, in accordance with the Canadian model, was introduced in Finland at the end of the 1970s. It is an optional teaching program which exists for those who have the majority language as their first language, and in this case Finnish, and who will not otherwise naturally come in contact with the immersion language, that is Swedish. The program used in Finland is early total immersion. Immersion usually begins at the age of 3 to 6 and continues from daycare, preschool to grade 9 of the comprehensive school. Around 4,500 children in Finland participate in language immersion, teaching in about 15 municipalities. This figure has remained more or less unchanged over the past 10 years. Let me give you an example from the Finnish school Keskuskoulu in the bilingual municipality of Vaasa. The school has 400 pupils in grades 1 to 6. 2/3 of the pupils get immersion education, and to clarify, all these pupils have Finnish as their mother tongue. In the first grade, all teaching is done in Swedish, and when the pupils reach grades 5 to 6, half the teaching is done in the immersion language and half in the pupils' first language and in other languages. The teachers who do their teaching in the immersion language only speak that language with the pupils, since it is important that the pupils will hear and use the immersion language in different functions and different situations. The aim of immersion for the pupils is to reach functional proficiency in writing and speaking the immersion language, while at the same time the pupils' first language is developed. The immersion program complies with the national curriculum, and the immersion pupils are to be given the knowledge that the curriculum presupposes. Immersion has proven to be a successful teaching method. Finnish-speaking pupils who are in Swedish language immersion have on average slightly better mother tongue skills than children in ordinary Finnish language schools. Immersion pupils have positive attitudes to other languages and cultures, get better results than the average, for instance, in mathematics and in English, and are more oriented towards general upper secondary education than pupils on average. There is a large interest among parents, schools, and also some municipalities for immersion. The biggest challenges are a shortage of qualified immersion teachers, and in some cases, municipalities' limited economical resources. I believe that families who choose immersion in Swedish for their children understand that children who participate in immersion education have a much wider range of possibilities in the future labor market, being fluent in both Finnish and Swedish, as Swedish is the bridge language when it comes to cultural and economic relations with neighboring Nordic countries. So, dear friends, to learn a language is to have one more window from which to look at the world. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Christina, for your contribution. We leave now the north and move to the warm south. Hello, Mònica. Many thanks for having accepted our invitation. The implementation of the language immersion program in Catalonia started in the 80s. What is your overall opinion of the outcomes achieved after all these years?
Hello, everybody. I'm going to present to you the Catalan language model in the education system. Since 1983, when the first linguistic law was passed after the recovery of the democratic institutions in Spain, Catalan language has become the main language of schooling. To turn this minority language into the main language of schooling and to give access to that language to the pupils who didn't have Catalan as their first language at that moment, in 1985, the language immersion program was implemented in a big number of schools, especially in the geographic areas of Catalonia, where pupils and their families didn't speak Catalan. That meant an enormous change of the school system that has been working in Spanish for a long time, and the teachers have had to spend a long effort to change their methodologies. After 40 years, the Catalan population composition has changed a lot. If during the early 80s of last century, more or less half of the population had Catalan as the first language and the other half had Spanish, nowadays around 20% of the population has come from abroad. So we have sensed nowadays around 250 languages. That has meant an important impact in the school system. At that moment, we have almost 14% of our students with foreign nationalities. And after 3 decades, more or less, of these immigration waves, the real figures are that around 22% of our pupils have a background, a foreign background. And that means and has meant new and very, very important challenges for the whole school system, and especially for the learning of languages. That's the reason why 2 years ago, we launched a governmental strategy that aims to improve the children, the students' linguistic and communicative competence, but that sets the basis for an education model based on plurilingualism and interculturality, as our society and our schools are not anymore bilingual communities, but a real multilingual community. So the main goals of this strategy are to keep Catalan as the main language of schooling, because it's the weaker language, so it has to be preserved, and school is one of the spaces where it can take an important space, and because we think that it is really a key element for equal opportunities for all the students and to preserve social cohesion. Another goal is to guarantee equal linguistic command of the official languages, Catalan and Spanish, and Occitan in the Aran north of Catalonia, and at least one foreign language, which is mainly English. But this strategy also aims to facilitate and to engage all students to learn a second foreign language that can be any of the students' family language, and it also aims to recognize and protect and promote the maintenance of these languages. As you can imagine, the diversity in our schools is very big. And in some schools, we have more than 80% of students with foreign backgrounds, with more than 10 languages spoken in those schools. And all these children and all these schools have to work to achieve the goals that I have talked before, in order that they can achieve or acquire the linguistic skills that they will need to become competent and engaged citizens in a multilingual society as ours. To do that, we apply second language and immersive methodologies. And at the same time, every school has to fit the pedagogical and linguistic project, their pedagogical and linguistic project, to each particular situation, because every school has different characteristics. So it is compulsory for schools to develop a linguistic project where they have to have into account how they are going to teach or to use the language of schooling, depending on the learning, on the knowledge that the students have of this language. What languages are they going to offer as foreign languages? What or how many of these languages are going to be used also as languages of instruction? What are they going to do with the languages of the newcomers? Are they going to offer the students the opportunity to learn them in school, after school, etc.? And for that, they have this tool. This linguistic project is proposed like as a tool to help the teacher teams to reflect on their context, how many languages do their children speak, the families, the social environment, etc. So it provides the opportunity to analyze the context, to set specific goals for this kind of students. What kind of actions are they going to propose and to develop? Which kind of resources are they going to need? How are they going to implement all these actions and resources? And how are they going to assess and measure the progress of their students? The learning methods that we are proposing and for which we are organized a large number of teacher training programs are based on learning languages competently. And they are using the two big strategies that focus on integrating language learning with content and language learning together. Learning languages through subject is what all schools have been doing when implementing the linguistic immersion program. The same strategies that they are transforming a little bit when they are using CLIL or EMIL when teaching English or French through subjects. So we try to introduce these methodologies in trainings where they can learn the strategies and then they can be used in different contexts and in different languages. On the other side, we try to help language teachers to work together to arrive to pedagogical consensus and didactic planning in order to make help the students to make the interlinguistic transfers and to be aware of the shared characteristics in the languages so that they can do a more efficient learning of the different languages. And at the same time, we can provide these strategies like intercomprehension, international mobilities, how to make children aware of their language or linguistic knowledge, what's interculturality, to broaden all this linguistic awareness and language learning and helping them as well to use these languages in real context. All of this, we have been working with different research groups in the Catalan universities, and we have had into account the reference documents from the Council of Europe or from the European Union or the UNESCO. There's another important program that we are offering to schools, not only to help them to value the languages and cultures of their students and to promote these values of tolerance and respect to diversity, but also to help them to facilitate the learning of these languages, these heritage languages, and not only the learning, but also the academic recognition so that they can be treated and used as the curricular foreign languages. And for that, we are working collaboratively with many institutions of the environment through these local education plans in which we try to connect and to make this continuity and coherence between education and at school and the environment through informal and non-formal education. So that all together can give the skills that the students need to be competent. Just to finish, I would like to make some emphasis on the supports that we are giving to these foreign origin students, because when analyzing the outcomes, we still, even if they are already third generation, their outcomes are usually below the average of the autochthonous students' outcomes. So we have designed this route that we attend the children when they arrive at school, the children or the young people. Then we provide them the initial skills in the language of schooling, in Catalan in that case, so that they can attend as soon as possible the ordinary classroom. But we also give them, of course, personal attention, attention in emotional aspects, etc. Just that you can see the effort that represents the attention to these students. You can see in the peak of the immigrant waves, that it was in the school year 2008-2009, more than 1,200 teachers, extra teachers were provided just to give attention to these students. Nowadays, we have around 800 teachers in different schools offering this support for these students. And still, we have to keep working on that aspect to help them, because one of the indicators that is key is the command of the language of school for them to achieve the final results. To finish my presentation, I just give you the outcomes of students in the 4 main languages: Catalan, Spanish, English, and the second foreign language, which is in French normally. And as you can see, the results in the 4 languages are more or less the same. So in a way, we can affirm that our school system in the field of language acquisition is working quite well. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, one last thing. Because we have been, there has been some doubt about the use of Catalan as the main language of schooling in relation with the acquisition of the Spanish language. The Ministry of Education of Spain did this evaluation more or less 10 years ago to verify if the level of the Catalan students in Spanish was the same of the children from the rest of state. And this is the result, exactly the same, even from children living in monolingual communities. So thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks, Mònica, for your clarifying presentation. Well, it seems that this webinar came to an end. Thank you all once again for your contribution. I really hope that you found it useful and that enjoyed this time as much as I did. The full video will be uploaded into our YouTube channel. Goodbye and have a good day.